Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Carrow Road. Second time in 4 days. QPR, the visitors. Norwich City still searching for that first win. And here are the two changes. The headline news is that Jovan Makama misses out from the starting 11 with illness. So he is a late withdrawal from the side. And we obviously Mikko Topic, having suffered that ACL injury, misses out as well, which means Pelle Mattsson comes into midfield. Those are the only two changes from the Norwich City 11. That means they line up with Kovacevic in goal, Stacey, McConville, Darling and Fisher as the back four, McLean and Mattsson as the midfield two. Forson comes in for Jovan and Makama. Marcondes keeps his place with Schwartau also in that three behind Josh Sargent. So I'll just run you through that again. 4-2-3-1, Kovacevic in goal, Stacey, McConville, Darling and Fisher the back four, McLean and Mattsson the midfield two. No Makama through illness, and it's Forson, Marcondes and Schwartau behind Josh Sargent. The subs bench is Grimshaw, Duffy, Medic, Adalusi makes the bench, Jacob Wright, Mate Jurasek makes the bench, Tony Springett makes the bench, Matt and Errol Mundle-Smith. Paddy, let's start with Jovan Makama, because after his goal on Tuesday night, his form generally, it's a massive shame that he's not available here this afternoon, given what he's been given to Norwich City.
Yeah, but it's no surprise this time of year that is kicking in. The Davitt house are rife, and I'm not drawing a parallel, but I'm just saying there's plenty of flu in my household, so to hear that one of the Norwich players has gone down, what you need now in that scenario is that they can isolate him and that doesn't spread to the rest of the group, because there's enough players out injured without adding another tranche of flu-related, illness-related. Yeah, we'll get an update from Philippe after the game, but when you were down there yesterday and there was no sense of that, was there? So you'd imagine maybe it's just over the last 24 hours or so that's come to pass. Probably woke up this morning not feeling too clever. And you have to say he's probably got himself to a position now where he's too important, particularly with Sargent not quite firing and Quistgarden seemingly needing to be kept in reserve a little bit, that you can't really risk him being out for any length of time. So, he's made the call. It's a shame because obviously by common consent, he was the best player on the park midweek for Norwich, and looks like, as Philippe said to you yesterday, a player there where the ceiling is very high, and he was looking forward to try and accelerate that process. Well, not today, unfortunately. And flipping that, of course, Forson coming in, and he must be desperate to stay clear of injury, stay in this side, and show glimpses of what he's shown in those areas of the pitch under the last two or three managers. That there's a player there. I think we can all see there is a player there of some technical promise, and mainly through injury, he's just not had that opportunity to get a run of games. But today is an opportunity for him, and you hope, obviously, Sargent comes to the party. And for me, I hope we see Quistgarden as well, because I think, as he proved up until the last game or two, he is another one who carries, like Makama, a genuine goal for it.
And that was going to be my next point, because clearly Forson's got the go, and he came on in midweek. I thought there was some nice flashes, and I thought there were maybe some aspects physically where, probably similarly maybe to Mate Jurasek, he looked quite a bit off it, which is understandable given probably where he's been from a fitness perspective. But Mateusz Quistgarden scores 3 and 3 and then doesn't play for either the two games at Carrow Road. What are your thoughts on that? Because it feels a little bit strange from the outside looking in.
Well, we would certainly ask him after the game about that, because you would have thought if he hadn't featured midweek, then he would definitely start today, off the back of what he was doing in the last 2 or 3 games, spanning Clement, spanning Manning as well. So we need to drill into that a little bit more with Clement. Is there a management issue? We know that has been the case with him this season, that he's been managing his body, and he obviously was out for 2 months or so with that knee-related issue. Are there some flags there that, in terms of the backdrop of all these injuries, that they don't want to push him too much? But if he's fit enough to be on the bench, and surely he's fit enough to be considered. So for a start, particularly with Makama not being involved today, to sort of parachute Forson in ahead of him does seem, on the face of it, quite strange. But maybe we'll bowl that one up Philippe after the game and see what he has to say. But maybe in his thought process as well, if Sargent doesn't fire again today, then you can interchange him with Quistgarden. Maybe that's in his thought process as well, that there's a balance to be struck here in terms of interchanges as attacking players. So, but there's absolutely no doubt it does seem on the face of it quite a puzzling one that Chris Garding isn't starting today when he didn't start midweek, having scored in 3 prior to that. If it isn't fitness related, then not quite sure what it would be. But there you go. He's making the calls, and okay, it was a sting in the tail here in terms of result, but large part of that performance I think you would have felt was a step forward, and maybe he wants to, as he's talked about recently, is retain a degree of structure in this period and not try and disrupt. He talked about McLean not wanting to put him to left back because he wants him in the middle of the park, and he wants to retain that familiarity as he builds out and builds foundations. And maybe that's where his head's at the top end of the pitch as well, that he doesn't really want to experiment too much. Sargent is the focal point, and then just around him, you can tweak it a little bit. Schwartzau's obviously starting again today, as is Marcondes. So there's a consistency there in terms of selection. But me personally, I'd have Chris Gardner in all day long.
Yeah, me too, I think, particularly after I didn't feel it was Marcondes' best effort on Tuesday night. I'm sure he would probably admit that as well. The bench pad, very young look to obviously Theo Adelusi, who's seen on the bench a few times this season, clearly one that they like. Tony Springett back on there, Errol Mundle-Smith back on there. Obviously, Jacob Wright, who we haven't seen really substantially for a significant period of time. It's quite a young bench, really, isn't it, from perhaps where they would want to be, which I guess underlines and the point that Philippe Clement has made a few times about the sheer number of players he's got missing due to injury at the moment.
Well, that's the bottom line, isn't it? I think in an ideal world, Philippe Clement isn't selecting Adelusi, isn't selecting Springett, maybe even Mundle-Smith, but you have to populate a bench with 20 in total, plus the 11, so that's where it's at. 9 was 9, wasn't it? Injured players. Now it's 10 with Topic. And Makama's unavailable through flu. So, they do carry a big squad, but not when you get to the point where half of it is unavailable. But as he said to you yesterday as well, in the sense of the left-back debate, what can you do about it? He can't control that. He can't control that he's got no Creseni, that he's got no Jeff Schlupp or Lucy Mahovo. So he can only control the players he's got available, and that's, I suppose, you broaden it out. That is also the case in terms of the options he's got on the bench. But it doesn't look like too much in the way of game-changing potential if they needed it in this game today. So that is a concern, I'm sure. But what can he do? That's the hand he's been dealt, and he's going to try and play it the best he can. But I've just seen a question there about has Jurasek been forgiven? Well, he's on the bench, and he might be needed today. And if he comes on, let's hope he has a point to prove in a positive way. And that the story around him this game is, right, okay, he's responded in the right way. Clement says he has, but we'll only really know that for certain when he gets another opportunity on this pitch. If that is today, then let's hope he has lit a fire under him, to put it that way. And if so, then that will look like a good piece of man management. But at the moment, the jury has to be out with him because his career so far in Norwich colours has been not a lot to write home about. So, let's hope that is a positive story today.
What did you make of what Clement said about that yesterday? And to be honest, I think he's managed the whole situation quite well. I think it would have been easy probably for him to throw him under the bus, and maybe in terms of his fitness levels and not being where he wanted to be. Thought he deflected quite well post-game and then almost kind of tried to G him up and offer him a little bit of positivity yesterday. That feels probably like quite clever man management now.
Yeah, I mean,
providing he gets a reaction, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he's as we've just discussed there, he's pretty low on bodies, so you can't really put him to the side in that context anyway. But certainly not when you wrap around the transfer element to his arrival and the reputation that he arrived with. But there's absolutely no doubt, Clement has arrived very quickly. I might add the same conclusion that a lot of fans will have arrived at, that he isn't fit. That's an indictment on him. It's an indictment on the people around him in terms of the fitness and recovery types at this football club. And they have to somehow short-circuit that process. And as I say, if what happened to him midweek doesn't light a fire under him, then nothing will for me, because that was an embarrassing episode for him to have to endure. But it's good to hear, at least the way Clement has packaged it, that he has responded in the right way. And I think I get the sense he does like him as a player, and he is aware of him, and he does know there's a player in there. But you not dispute that he doesn't look physically at the level he needs to impact the games and bring that quality and technical ability that he clearly has to bear in this environment. So for him, read a lot of these other players who, collectively look like they're not at the levels. Ben Napper himself said, this squad isn't fit enough. It's frankly embarrassing, but that's what we're dealing with. That's what Philippe Clement is dealing with. And, as I said to him at his unveiling, how does he now, coming in 15 games in, 3 months in, get them to that point where they're fit enough? Because you're now in this relentless team cycle, and in between the games, it's recovery. I don't really see how they get to the optimum levels of fitness that he wants. But he clearly has this background or this reputation that, the fitness and the data element of it. So we'll see. We'll see in the weeks ahead. But, that wasn't a good look for Jurasek, certainly, or the people around him who were tasked with getting him to a physically fit level. So we'll see.
What was it Napper said in the summer? He stayed around. He didn't go on international duty to get fit. I mean, to be in this situation, November, I think, is a sad indictment. And clearly, as Clement caveated, there was illness and other factors involved. But the reality is, it's not a new conversation that we're having here about Mate Jurasek not looking fit enough. So it will be interesting, A, if he gets on again, and B, how he applies himself if he does get on. Let's bring you the QPR team. They arrive at Carrow Road, back-to-back wins at Hull, and then a really big 1-0 win over Blackburn in the week. They've made one change. Ben Hamer, who was in goal for that, went off with injury, and he hasn't made it for today. Nardi in goal for them, and Wene Dunn, Cook and Field as the back four. Madsen and Varane, who was a Norwich City target. Was it January? My mind gets Jonathan Varane. That was...
Yeah,
was that January? Yeah. Feels like a lifetime ago. Dembele, Chair and Sato behind Romain Burrell. Their subs bench. Walsh, Clark Salter, Norrington Davis, former Norwich loanee Isaac Hayden, Kieran Morgan, who was involved in that Kenny McLean incident last season, Poku, Paul Smith, who scored the winner at Blackburn on Wednesday night, Michel Frey and Richard Kone. So it's an interesting one today, Paddy. I thought it was interesting how Clement wasn't shy in saying, and I think it's the reality, that this is going to be a more formidable test, a tougher test than what Norwich City faced on Tuesday night. And I guess that's the challenge now, isn't it? Can they display improvement against a side who comes here off the back of two really big wins, albeit they've got a day extra in terms of the recovery over QPR and obviously less travel. But you look at that Norwich team and how short it is in certain areas, and maybe it's not, as Clement made a point yesterday, maybe it's not that much of an advantage. What are you thinking and feeling ahead of today?
Well, it's hard to, so early in what Clement's trying to do, allied to the injuries, allied now to Makama being unavailable through illness. But, everything that he's so far talked about, everything that, we can see from, less so Birmingham, because they came up against a very good Birmingham outfit this time last week. But I thought that moving it on to Oxford, and albeit it was Oxford, but then, they had a good win last night. So, let's not dismiss them too lightly. Would lead you to think that Norwich will be equipped to come here today and build on again. But what that looks like in terms of, I think it'd be a faith really to see with any certainty how I feel this one's going to go today. I think QPR have had a little bit of an upturn, but I just look at this championship as it's much of a muchness. You can't really too much store, and that's
apart from Norwich seemingly.
Well, up there or my mob at the top, in between. There's such a beige element to this league that it's hard. I would be less concerned either way about what QPR will offer today. It's more, will there be another progression from Tuesday night to Saturday under Clement? And I think everything he says, every day extra he gets with this group of players, every analysis work he can do with them, you have to think that those players must be enjoying having that direction, having that sense of somebody who's okay, who's got his hand firmly on the tiller here, and the messaging is very clear. They all clearly know where they stand, I think, under this guy, and they're obviously responding, because that was a markedly better performance in the round midweek. So
it's a low quality game, though, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, but it might take that for the foreseeable. Yeah. It might. I don't think Norwich is going to be suddenly clicking into gear and blowing teams away. It might have to be pretty unedifying stuff in terms of entertainment value, if at the end result of that is they get themselves on the right side of these results until they stabilise in this division. So I could see a draw today, if I'm honest, but I'll flip it to a Norwich win, but you do fear that we're still in the very early stages of what Clement's trying to do with this group of players, and he doesn't have a huge amount of room for manoeuvre in terms of player availability today. So, against the QPR team who do seem to be improving in the last 3 games, maybe a draw, but we'll just say Norwich edge it 2-1.
Yeah, I'm probably in the realm of thinking a draw as well. I'll come to that, back to that in just a moment. Just looking at where Norwich stand and the live scores, obviously Portsmouth and Sheffield United, but 2 teams in the round Norwich at the start of play who are in action. They kicked off at 12:30. Sheffield United leading Leicester away from home 3-1. That's some result for Chris Wilder's men and would move them 9 points clear of Norwich. If I'm being completely honest, I don't think they are a team that Norwich City will have to worry about for a long period of time in terms of those in and around that drop zone. Portsmouth, more pertinently, 1-0 down at home to Bristol City. They, as a result of Sheffield United's win and, of course, of Oxford United beating Ipswich last night, would drop into the drop zone. With that, 17 points, still a 7-point cushion for Norwich City to overcome. Swansea are away at West Brom this afternoon, but of course, are hoping Vitor Matos, who's gone in there, can provide them a little bit of a spark and a little bit of a bounce to maybe get a result against a West Brom team that is flailing somewhat, particularly in second halves of games. As for this game, I think the reality is we can look around the teams in and around Norwich, but until they start winning games, it becomes pretty irrelevant, to be honest. I said in midweek, I think this has got to be a 4-point week at a very minimum. That's now obviously the maximum that Norwich can get. I think today's going to be a draw. I just think QPR, maybe from where they were midweek, all the travel, all of the recovery elements, may well, have that fatigue. And Norwich, again, I think we're questioning whether they have the quality to turn improvement into results. So I'm going to be quite rare. I'm going to go for a 0-0 today, and maybe a pretty dire one at that as well. We will have you covered. Pinken.com, the place to go for all your coverage, analysis and reaction to today's game, irrespective of how it unfolds. There's the Norwich City team down there. No Jovan Makama is the headline through illness. Forson comes in on what we're expecting to be on the right-hand side for him. And let's hope Norwich City can finally get that Carrow Road duck off of their shoulders by winning here. I think I've combined 2 sayings there, but it's fine. Off their shoulders by winning here this afternoon. Thanks for watching. See you soon.